We're going to introduce Gary. He'll give us his credentials. Then we're going to talk a little of this film behind me.
One of the best films ever made, Streets of Fire, starring Michael Pare.
And then I'm going to ask him how he saw us because I'm fascinated how he discovered us. 3, 2, 1.
Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother...
Welcome to the party, pal!
Welcome to Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Podcast. I'm Ralph Quattrucci.
I'm Sean Paul Murphy.
I'm John Quattrucci.
I'm Chris Coker.
I'm Drew Gould.
And I'm special guest Gary Goldstein.
There you go.
Gary. We have a very special guest. Gary found us. Somehow he found us and asked to be on the show. Nobody's ever asked to be on the show, so we're thrilled. Wow. Gary, give us your credentials and then tell us how you found us, please.
Yeah,
please.
Sure. Hey, great to be here. Thank you for allowing me to invade your space. I'm a screenwriter primarily. I've been writing for a long time. I started off my work life as a film publicist. I did that for a while after I graduated from college. I worked for Universal Pictures for a bit. And then I moved into writing television, episodic television. And over the course of the years, I've written many, many TV movies, some episodic TV feature films, a lot of stage plays. And I wrote 2 novels. I had one novel published in August. I have another novel coming out this fall. And since 2007, I've been a contributing film reviewer and arts feature writer for the Los Angeles Times, which has brought my fantasy of writing, being a film reviewer for a major daily paper, my childhood fantasy, to full circle, which has been a great experience, totally fun. And I found this podcast. I think I just found it on Twitter. I think you have a great sort of system of running all your running all the shows, running the ads for them, kind of like a revolving thing. And I found it, and you were talking about Streets of Fire, and I was like, I got to listen to that. And then I did, and I was hooked. And then I listened to other ones, and it was great. So so I was just excited to.
And you still wanted to be on it.
Wow. Still wanted to be on, yeah.
Well, we have the other writer in the group, Sean, to thank for the Twitter.
Yeah, he's the Twitter guy.
Good job.
So this is amazing. We have 2 writers in the show.
Yeah.
We're going to be ringing that bell. That bell's going to be rung a lot tonight.
Those are some credentials, you guys. I mean, it's
all right.
Great. So welcome aboard.
Yeah.
So when Gary got in touch, he wanted to do a film, and the film Gary wanted to do was Taxi Driver, which fit right into the theme of the show, which is fantastic. But before we do that, like he said, he found us through the podcast we did about Streets of Fire, which about half the crew here liked, half the crew didn't.
I don't think Gary, it was 50-50.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
I don't think so.
Gary actually has a connection to that film, which is what made it so interesting. So, Gary, why don't you tell us your connection? And if anybody wants to jump in and talk about it, let's go.
In my first life, and you have to remember that I started working when I was 8, but I was a publicist for Universal Pictures, and this was at the time that I just started working at the studio in LA when Streets of Fire came out. It was the summer of May of 1984, I think. There was a new regime that had come in. The movie was produced under the old regime. There was another president, another head of marketing, and all that. And I think over the course of my few years working at Universal, we probably had 3 different regimes that I worked for. And so on the morning, we'd always have these marketing meetings every Monday morning. And if we had a movie that opened the weekend before, the marketing meeting was sort of like a postmortem on what happened over the weekend, good or bad, about the movie. And Streets of Fire had just opened, and it did not open well. I just remember what the prevailing feeling was. Well, we loved the movie. It didn't work, and that was it. But the thing was, and I when you were talking about it on the podcast, and you talked about how new regimes aren't necessarily looking for the old, the films produced by the old regime, that they're kind of like, that are kind of the orphans, about them succeeding. But I have to say, I think that, they really wanted the movie to succeed, because Joel Silver was a big producer. Walter Hill was a big director. It was a hot movie. There was a big soundtrack. They really wanted it to work. I mean, I have to say, it was a hard movie to market. I don't know if it would be easier now, harder now. I don't know. But I think having been in on much of the marketing of what went on with that, tremendous amount of effort was put into making that movie work. But I remember seeing a screening of it on the Universal lot in the Alfred Hitchcock Theater, which is their kind of big theater there. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, it was like the best place you could watch a movie at the time. And the sound was phenomenal. The picture was beautiful. And it was just gorgeous, And I remember watching this movie saying, man, it was the second time I saw it. I was saying, God, this movie, it's got to find an audience. It's so great. And then it didn't, which was disappointing. And I've always been a huge fan of the soundtrack. Nowhere Fast is like one of my all-time favorite.
Great soundtrack.
Cuts of any movie. I love Diane Lane. I've always been a huge Diane Lane fan, and I just love the movie. Now, I have to say, I have not seen the movie in a while. And what I always find is that when I see these movies that I loved from the 70s, 80s, when I was maybe a little less formed as a person, as an adult or as a watcher of movies, sometimes it's a little disappointing. And sometimes I don't go back and watch these movies because I want to preserve, the joy that I had and the love that I had. And I think of various scenes in the movie and various lines, and Amy Madigan's great line, with Willem Dafoe, all the great stuff in that movie. And I don't want it to not work, So I saw it a while ago. And I'm not like yesterday, maybe 10 years ago or something, and I still enjoyed it. But the PS of the story is that I was at a Starbucks here in LA, maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something. And we were sitting outside having coffee with a friend, and who walks up but Michael Pare? And he actually knew the person that I was having coffee with, who was just, I don't know, I forget who it was, but like they knew each other. And he came up and said hello. And I was like, oh my God, it's Michael Pare. Like Michael Pare is like, he comes up, he's like this just really nice, charming, humble guy, he's not, Streets of Fire. And I just said to him, I said, I'm a huge Streets of Fire fan. I said, as a matter of fact, and this was the truth, driving over, I was listening to the cassette. It was long enough ago that you could have a cassette player in your car. But the cassette of the soundtrack driving over to coffee today is, oh, you're shitting me. I was like, no, really. It was great. So that was very cool. But I've always loved the movie. And actually, before I started working at the studio, I was working in the field for Universal and in New York at the time, and we had a marketing meeting the year before that, 1983, and we all came out to the studio and we took a tour of the set of Streets of Fire, and they had, because we were shooting at that point, like the year before, 8 months before or something, and Joel Silver took us on a tour of it, showed us clips of the movie, and you just would have thought this movie was going to be Star Wars 2 or something. You just thought this was going to be the biggest thing to ever come down the pike. So you can't predict. You just can't predict what's going to happen with movies.
I don't remember seeing it when it came out. When was it? 86? When did that come out?
84.
84. Yeah.
And looking at it now, it just seemed Walter Hill. You heard the podcast, so it doesn't matter. But the other Michael Pare soundtrack I want to bring up is Eddie and the Cruisers.
Eddie and the Cruisers, absolutely.
That's a great soundtrack. So,
great.
And I have tickets to go see Beaver. What's his name?
Brown. Beaver Brown Band.
I was supposed to see him 2 years ago, and the COVID happened, and I couldn't. And
they're from Rhode Island.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Does that go ahead, Chris?
Gary? Let me ask you a question, Gary. Did it not do well because the competition at the time, or they just the marketing of it couldn't capture what that movie really was? Because it is a tough movie to define.
I think that's really it. I think that the marketing, if you remember the poster was kind of like a drawing, kind of like I don't know what you'd call it, kind of stylized drawing of Michael Pare and Diane Lane. He's holding the gun, the rifle. It's all the colors. I just think it's very. I remember there was copy on the poster, and it was kind of like long copy, really trying to explain what this was in kind of a fun, entertaining way. And I think it was just kind of hard to capture, the essence of that movie. And maybe it was just at a time. That was the year. I mean, the summer. What came out? Ghostbusters, Karate Kid. '84 was a big year for movies, for movies, and I think it just got a little lost. And also there were no big star names in it. Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, I was just going to say Michael Pare wasn't box office.
Even to this day, if you had Michael Pare, Diane Lane, Willem Dafoe, and Amy Madigan in a movie, it still wouldn't necessarily. Nobody still would go. There's no guarantee. It was a great cast. There were great actors. There's still great actors. It's just very hard to find a hook into a movie like that. And the soundtrack was, I think it's a great soundtrack. I don't remember the soundtrack getting a lot of airplay, honestly. I had one song became a hit.
Yeah, I Can Dream About You.
I Can Dream About You.
That was a huge hit.
But the Nowhere Fast and Tonight Is What It Means to Be Young are great songs. And Jim Steinman was an amazing composer. He did all the Meatloaf stuff. So the fact that those are kind of obscure tracks to this day is kind of weird. So many years later. I just think it was a hard movie to market, and I just, like I said, I know the studio put a lot behind it. Really try to make it work, but it was a tough one. But I hope
that Monday morning you guys have that meeting, and you realize the Friday box office, the weekend box office is terrible. Right. What happens then? It's just you pull it out of theaters. It just drops. What goes on?
Time, it was obviously very different than it is now. But at the time, movies were especially big studio movies were booked into first run theaters for X number of weeks. They had probably I don't know, maybe a 4 or 6 week run guarantee or something, maybe less. I don't know. And you'd lose theaters over the weeks, but by and large, you had to keep it going. You had to spend money. A lot of times what would happen is that if it didn't have a great opening, they would spend more, like they do a whole new TV campaign, let's say, for it. The angle we took maybe didn't theaters, we got to keep getting people in there. Maybe we'll try something else. So there was a lot of that. Certainly when a movie gets great reviews, you can market those. A lot of times actors would go on, would do publicity after the fact as well, just to keep it going. But now it's so different. Movies have a very short, if they have any window at all, they've got a very short window. Right. And that's a problem. But back then a lot was put into it. I mean, when I first started as a publicist, I went on press tours, around into all these cities with actors or directors or people connected to films, that the studios would send out. People in a million years, you'd never think they would send out to, spend money on to this day, but they did. And we put together full on press tours locally in smaller cities, to promote the movies, because it was all theatrical. There was no cable. There was nothing, like there is now. There are other ways of seeing movies, but not like it is now. So it was very, very different. Marketing is very different.
Well, the movie did a lot better on video and on cable.
I'm sure. Yes.
Sure. Chris has been dying to jump in. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I have an unusual kind of question, and I'm not sure how much, insight you would have into this, but like one of the things I remember, I came of age in the 80s, right? In the 80s, I remember 80s films. That's where I fell in love with films and things like that. But one of the things I remember, especially for the time before you could own a movie, when VHSs were just prohibitively expensive, and most people didn't even really, at best, you had a VCR to rent, movies and that kind of thing. I noticed that there wasn't anything, and obviously the soundtrack was the primary focus. The idea was the music would drive people to the movie, and the movie would drive people to the music, right? But I've noticed that there was no novelization, which was almost just like a standard thing back then. And don't get me wrong, it's not like a super narrative-driven film, but I have novelizations of movies that are very light, and they would, they'd hire some writer to pad them out, and they would.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, for that movie, I can't imagine, what a novelization would be or who would read it. But still, like you said, there were novelizations back then of the most unlikely movies. And where are novelizations now? God, that's a whole new business I could tap into.
Well, Tarantino just did. Well, he just
did this,
right?
Yeah.
They still actually write there. Not, but I was just going to say, I actually have, and this is going to sound odd, but I actually have the novelization to Ridley Scott's first film, The Duelists. If you want to talk about
that, is odd.
How do you make
But back then, like look at The Duelist. That was a big Paramount picture, like
Harvey Keitel, right?
Yeah, Harvey Keitel parodying. So it's a high tone kind of thing. I don't think the movie did anything, but yeah, you could see them saying, "Oh, let's satisfy the intellectual side of the potential moviegoer for this movie." But movies were. I could talk forever about 70s movies. I mean, they were. It was just
Ralph's
different. It was just different. You know, it was just so different.
It was different.
I bemoan it all the time. I feel, 100 years old when I do it, but it's like, those were the days, for movies. And
I always feel like I have to take a shower after I watch those 70s.
John can't handle he can't handle
Chris, they should have done a graphic novel because it visually fit a graphic novel perfectly.
If there was back then, yeah.
But
nowadays.
does the novelization and a graphic novel come out if the movie's successful, or does it come out as part of the?
Sometimes they come out simultaneously.
Yeah, they usually would come out simultaneously. I'm like a big fan of that stuff. Like, let me put it this way: they used to have these things called storybooks, right? Which were, they had images from the film, and they would basically be like a kid, almost like a kidified version. And I had the Star Wars storybook, which had all these scenes that did not appear in the movie. And now that the DVDs and Blu-rays have come out with all these extra deleted scenes, you're like, this is where it all came from. Even if you read like the Marvel comic book adaptations, I think what would do, and Gary, you would know better than me. I think the idea was they would give these folks, whether they were doing the novelization or the comic book, they would give them the final shooting script. So like there are like significant changes in these things because they had to have them ready for when the film came out, And so like, for example, one of my David Lynch's Dune, right? Obviously that's no novelization because it was based on a book but like the comic book and the storybook end the way that the book ends, but the film ends differently because De Laurentiis didn't like the ending. Right. So like, it's funny, you read these things and you're like, well, wait a minute, that didn't happen in the movie. And I remember as a kid, I would read these and I would see these differences and it would make me think. It's kind of when I realized that, they don't use everything in the final movie. It was like my first introduction to editing was the Star Wars storybook, it really was.
Probably, when you're dealing with an existing book like Dune, that's what they're going to publish. Then they put the cover art, the movie art on it and do like a book tie-in, but you're going to end up with that. But I think, and again, I don't even know if they do them anymore or have done them in a long time, but I would say back then what they did was they would shoot the movie and then they'd have the final script. And it's not like they were publishing the script, they were publishing a narrative version of it. So there was plenty of time between the time the movie was done and the time it came out to publish an advanced novel, and sometimes they didn't do it until after the fact. And I think I don't know. I may have a few left over in my closet somewhere, but I think there's probably a lot of people, movie fans like us, from back in the day who have those tie-ins. I think we'd be shocked to see what some of those movie book tie-ins and the fact that people bought them. I mean, they were like 75 cents back then, but the people actually bought them, which is crazy.
I could say in two cases of my movies, one of my movies. Sarah's Choice, they wanted to do, the studio wanted to do a novelization, but they wanted the lead actress to write it. Oh. But she wasn't really an actress. So they hired ghostwriters. I was up for ghostwriting it, but we didn't get it. And the ghostwriter made more than the screenwriters.
But the actress wasn't much of a writer.
Yeah, that's what he meant.
Well, she wasn't writing it at all.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you said the actress wasn't much of an actress.
But I'm confused.
No. She wasn't much of a
writer.
Okay. So we she was the star of the thing. She was the draw. She was also a Grammy-winning recording artist. So, she had a big, platform, as they would say. And she had written books before. I don't know.
Oh.
Hopefully she actually wrote them. But this book, she wouldn't have written a single word of it. So in that case, but recently, my most recent project, Revelation Road, based on a movie I wrote, it's a streaming series. Sony is producing it. And Sony is very interested in having a graphic novel. And part of my contract for having the movie made is I have to write a first negotiation on the graphic novel, which Sony is very interested in doing in theory, but they haven't approached me yet. But, and if it's going to happen, I'll be writing it,
And you would have had Michael Paré in that film?
We need Michael Paré. Sean, when will we see that series?
It just finished shooting in South Africa, 7 episodes. I don't know. Frankly, I can't talk because of my contract about it. I can't talk about the details publicly.
You'd have to kill me. Okay.
Wow.
I got it.
But I suspect it'll be a year before
Oh,
it's
you just
out.
talked a lot about it.
I didn't give you any specifics.
Okay.
And I also have a non-disparagement clause.
No.
Why did you have to tell us that? Did you want to disparage it?
Yeah, what's the
Not at all. I'm trying to endorse people to see the series.
I have a disparagement.
I would like that clause here. Can we have that clause here too for the show? Because a lot of disparagement goes on in this show.
And actually, can I go on a little side thing with Gary?
Sure.
Well, you just did, but let's do
Let me
another
put you
one.
in a separate room so we can talk.
No. Just one screenwriting question. Because not just my contracts, but every contract I've been seeing from other writers who show them to me, they're all getting, NDAs on them and non-disparagement. Before this year, no one had ever handed me
I've never seen it. I just signed 2 contracts. I didn't remember seeing it, but it could be in there. I don't know. These are TV movies, so I don't know whether they would even do that. But that's interesting.
Yeah, because
Sean, that's because there was a film trilogy that was supposed to be made into a streaming series, and there was a lot of stuff to work out that was quite intense. And so after a result of that negotiation to now make a Sony streaming series, it changed the way that contracts are written.
that I do not have a non-disclosure on, only a non-disparagement. No, but other people because a lot of screenwriters reach out to me on Twitter and all, and they've been showing me these contracts. And I've never seen so many NDAs, because NDAs are something that, because of the Me Too movement, are supposedly like unethical and immoral, because that's how people got away with stuff. Right. So in theory, Hollywood wasn't going to do the NDA thing anymore, but now I'm seeing all of them. But back to the show.
When you see movie review shows, you don't get a lot of contract talk. So if this isn't the time to subscribe, I don't know what would be. But thank you for bringing that.
I can't believe how you can bring that all in like that.
Yeah.
All right.
But I want to ask Gary one question about Streets of Fire. How did it do at the previews?
I don't know. The screening I was at was just like a screening for the studio, and people were crazed. They thought it was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
To watch that movie with great sound on a great screen, with, 400 people who are supportive and want the movie to do well so they can keep their job. Everybody's really behind it, but that was a great experience. I had seen it in theaters after that as well. And, if you could find a place that had a decent number of people in it, there was always a great response to it. It was just getting people there. Like it always.
I just don't see
Chris
how
and I were
plays.
big fans. The rest of the guys.
I know.
I don't see how it could have played to like the normal moviegoer, like the average moviegoer. I just don't think they'd get that film.
Probably not. You have to know.
You guys are all immersed
now
in
we're
film.
talking
We're all
down to
immersed
the
in
audience.
film. I'm not talking down to the audience. I just don't think that one. No disparagement. I think I got to put that in.
I think that was a little disparagement.
Well, I just think it wouldn't play in the malls. That's all. This is a strange film.
Well, I mean, it was a rock and roll fable.
Whatever
they were hoping that the soundtrack and the music was going to make that movie. I mean, obviously.
Right. It's a great cast. Everyone seems like so many people went on to do bigger and better things.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, it was. And the music was great. I mean, like Gary, you said, I bought the soundtrack right after I saw the movie. I've had it for as long as the movie's been out, and I love it. I still listen to it all the time. It's great.
Had I known you then, I could have gotten you one for free. He had a batch of them
Those
in the
cassettes
office.
back in the day were like $8 a piece.
Yeah, they were an actual album.
All right, let's get back in time and talk about what the film Gary wanted to bring, a brilliant film called Taxi Driver.
So what do you want to hack for, Bickle?
I can't sleep nights.
There's porno theaters for that.
Yeah, I know, I tried that.
So what do you do now?
Ride around nights, mostly. Subways, buses. Figure, I'm gonna do that, I might as well get paid for it.
Travis, you run all over town, don't you? I mean, you handle some pretty rough customers, huh?
Yeah.
You carry a piece?
No.
You need one?
No.
12 hours of work and I still can't sleep. Damn. Days go on and on. And they don't end.
It's got you down?
Yeah, it got me real down. I just want to go out. I really want to. I got some bad ideas in my head. I just. Why won't you talk to me? Why don't you answer my calls when I call you? You think I don't know you're here?
Let's not have any trouble.
I don't know? You think I don't know?
Would you please leave?
Get your hands off.
Okay, then leave,
I just
okay?
want you to know that I know.
Let's not have any trouble. Please, just leave. This is the place to do it.
The idea had been growing in my brain for some time. True force. All the king's men cannot put it back together again.
Well, the reason I wanted to talk about Taxi Driver was I, as a huge 70s movies fan, I always look back on, I saw that movie in a screening room back when I was in Boston, living in Boston. And I was in college, I think. And I remember just being so incredibly blown away by it and seeing the movie a number of times after that and just still being so riveted. And I was a film student too. So we were always watching movies in like, you'd look at it for like cinematography, you'd watch it for music, you'd watch it for editing. It was like these courses I took around that time, like you were watching all these pieces of it. And this was when movies were just like, movies like that were being made, they were just so beautiful and so like artistic and, I think in an accessible way. As a lot of early Scorsese's movies were. But I remember seeing the movie and thinking it was amazing. And I hadn't seen the movie start to finish in many, many years. And I had COVID in January and I was just like in bed for like a couple of days. I was really out of it. So I had propped up my computer and watched Netflix or whatever, Amazon, whatever. And I went through, I said, okay, I'm sitting here. I'm going to watch something that I haven't seen in a long time that I really care about. So I watched Taxi Driver and it was just mind blowing watching this movie so many years later. And like I said, I really hadn't seen it start to finish in many, many years. And, like everything, you have to judge these movies, I think, based upon the time they were made.
Yeah. It is a movie of its time.
It's very much about, I watched 3 Days of the Condor a while ago, and I just couldn't, but I got to tell you, I listened to you did a podcast on 3 Days of the Condor, right? I listened to that and I was just, 3 Days of the Condor, I loved when it came out. I thought it was like one of the great all-time movies of the 70s. And I watched it again and it was like, boy, this is really stupid. It was like the whole thing. Well, you brought it up in the podcast, the whole thing with him and Faye Dunaway, it was just ridiculous. And I don't know, whatever. So you watch
Well, again, that was the two we talked about, the two big stars. They had to do something. And
sure.
And also, you just couldn't buy Robert Redford on a moped.
Yeah, well, the whole thing was silly, but I remember thinking it was a phenomenal movie back then. I still liked it. I still enjoyed watching it. I just looked at it and said, this wouldn't fly today. So there's a lot of that. Now in Taxi Driver, to me, I've talked about Taxi Driver and referenced it so much in my life, not in my writing necessarily, but just kind of like in my movie, my favorite movie life. When people say, "What are your favorite movies?" and all that, because I just think it's so brilliant. But watching it again, I had to kind of compartmentalize because the movie is beautiful. I mean, the movie, the cinematography, even watching it on my computer, the cinematography is amazing. The score by Bernard Herrmann, it was his last score, it was gorgeous. The acting is superb in that movie. And the funny thing is, I mean, De Niro is great, but Cybil Shepard was excellent. I you don't think of her as
that might be her the best in the movie.
I think so. And she was great, and all of it. But the problem was, for me, that the movie is very, very misogynistic. It's very homophobic. And but that is what things were back then. I don't want to say it didn't mean anything, but it didn't mean the way we look at it today necessarily.
Well, I have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
Do you think the film was homophobic or misogynistic, or the characters?
The characters. That's a good question. I mean,
I see the distinction there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. It's hard to say. I mean, but you walk away feeling like I want people who've never seen this movie to watch it. I came to it with love and history and could sort of push some of those things aside and still think it's a brilliant movie. But it takes it away a little bit. And I think if we watch so many movies from that period, and frankly, you don't have to go back as far as the 70s. You can go watch movies from the 90s, which seems so, kind of off right now in terms of we're in such a different place right now in terms of what you do and don't do and should and shouldn't say. And I understand all that. And as a writer, I come up against it a lot and have to navigate it and try to do it, do it the right way and be respectful. But, you go back. I mean, look, one of my favorite movies of all time is 16 Candles and the John Hughes movie. I've seen it a trillion times. I love it to death. I just can't. But, even then, when I first saw it, it was like, man, this is a terrible, terrible depiction of an Asian character. And you watch it now, it is just beyond the pale. But what do you do with that? It's like, how do you kind of compartmentalize
that's the question. I don't know how.
Difficult.
It's even more difficult when one of your best actors who you love to watch gets caught up in a scandal. And
right.
You talk about Woody Allen, Kevin Spacey, just go down the list. And now those movies become, I don't want to watch Annie Hall anymore. I don't want to, and Annie Hall, one of my favorite films, it's a difficult thing to be a fan.
It is.
Now that's different than what you're talking about, which is we're realizing that you go back in like even Blazing Saddles, John was saying last week, that you get a little tinge. You're still laughing, but it's like, and that's the Taxi Driver. There are scenes where those cabbies are all sitting around the table talking about stuff, and you're
right.
And
there's a lot of that, and then the whole and this I just read that apparently Travis Bickle going into the porn theaters all the time because he couldn't sleep. That apparently Paul Schrader, who wrote the movie, actually did that. He went through a period where they were just open all night, so he would go in, and that was so much of its time. And then you look at it, like you watch it and you say, yeah, I know Travis Bickle's not like the most connected guy, but he's got this gorgeous woman that he's taking on a date. Would he really take her to a porno movie, on 42nd Street? Would she even go? I mean,
he was predestined. Schrader is a very Calvinist guy. Yeah. Even the De Niro character is saying, I'm predestined to do this.
Yeah.
If you look at like Hardcore, Schrader's other film.
Yeah, another good film.
And his most recent film.
But anyway, so, I watched it with through that a lot of that prism, being sort of critical, being, looking back with perspective, being more evolved, I hope, than maybe any of us were back then, because whatever. But I still think it's a brilliant movie. I think it's beautiful. I think it's very powerful. I think the themes, are pretty much right on for today. It was very relevant. The movie felt very relevant. Sadly, New York is a better place. Theoretically, it looks better. It's more inviting. It's just different. It's different. That was very much of its time. New York in the 70s. You watch any of the movies we love from New York in the 70s, whether it's 3 Days of the Condor,
Hellhole.
Yeah, I watched a while ago. I watched
French Connection,
Born to Win. Did you ever see that movie with George Segal and Karen Black? Born to Win from 1971. The city just looked like a cesspool.
We're shot by Owen. What's his name? He was our
Reitzman. Owen Reitzman, isn't he? Our patron saint? Yeah.
But anyway, I think the movie was great. And I think De Niro, it's a phenomenal performance. I thought Cybil Shepard was great. I have to say, I was a little disappointed in Jodie Foster's performance in it. Not her performance, not the work that she did, but it was a very small part. I mean, it loomed so large in the history of movies, and yet watching it, it was like she doesn't come into it until very deep into the movie, in any significant way, and she's not in it that much. So that was surprising to me. I kind of always thought she was in it more, that she was a little more meaningful in it. Mm. And the irony is, she was nominated for an Oscar for it, which may seem like a bit of a stretch. Not when you look at who she became, it doesn't feel like so much of a stretch, but back then, for a very small part in this movie. And yet the actress who won supporting actress that year won it for an even smaller part, which is Beatrice Straight in Network, who won it.
She had one scene.
Maybe two, but one really, really good scene.
One monologue, really.
And that was the irony. And Paul Schrader was not nominated for best screenplay, which is kind of amazing when you look back on it and you look.
I was about to say, for one thing, along your lines, one film too, which is, I think is misinterpreted, is a film difficult to watch, is my favorite Western, which is The Searchers, because John Wayne's character is so outwardly racist towards Indians.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people want that film banned or not shown. But the thing is, even at the time, his character was an outcast because of his opinion.
Right.
That's why when the film ends, everyone's happy. Everyone, the reunion, everyone's happy. And he's standing outside and the door closes on him.
Isolated.
The film is condemning the racism, but people are missing the nuance of the character and what the filmmaker was trying to say. Like this film, like, is this film misogynistic? Is this film homophobic? It's hard to say, but it's a complicated character, and I think it is as relevant today. Yeah. Now, my wife, who's normally on the podcast, and this isn't the reason she's not here, though, is she was really offended by the whole, having this young actress, she really felt it was child abuse having Jodie Foster in this movie.
Sean, has she seen the movie?
And a lot of people make the same argument.
Did she watch the movie recently, or had she seen it?
Yeah, she just watched it with me a week ago. But a lot of people said the same thing about the girl in The Exorcist as well.
Right, they did. But now, Sean, wasn't in The Searchers, wasn't that also about a guy who did John Wayne kind of connect with a young girl or something? Wasn't it a similar thing?
Yeah, he was trying to rescue his niece, but not to save her, but to kill her.
Yeah, okay.
Because she had been contaminated.
Right.
He was like saving her virtue by killing her.
Mm-hmm.
And the subtext, which isn't in the film, but apparently John Ford, when they start, because you could tell that the John Wayne's character had feelings for his brother's wife, because this girl he's searching for is his niece. That right before they started shooting the first scene, John Ford walked up to him and said, "She's your daughter."
Mm.
To be his motivation for the character and his obsession with finding her and killing her, but I mean, it sounds like a weird plot.
Yeah.
But if you were as racist and as hateful of Native Americans as his character was, it made sense within the story.
Right.
But also coming back to Taxi Driver, forget the controversial elements of the film, which there are many, but structurally, I don't think they would make a movie like this now.
No.
Where exactly because of what you said, like Jodie Foster, she comes in late, she's barely in the film, but she's really a catalyst for, ultimately for I think one of my problems with movies now is I think everything's trying to squeeze into the save the cat paradigm. And it's sort of like this has to happen by this amount of pages. This has to happen. This theme stated by page 3, so on and so on. Did I think, screenwriters and directors don't have the same luxury to come into a story in a different way? I mean, I even think about Runaway Train, that Rebecca De Mornay's character doesn't come in until halfway through the movie. And she's going to show up. She's on the poster.
Yeah.
But if they remade that movie, they would show her near the beginning, which would ruin the surprise of her showing up halfway through the movie.
Yeah. Well, I think
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think movies in the 70s and, and actually you go back to we watch movies from the 40s or whatever, the whole way stories are told is a little different, and then when you come up to the 70s where it was so director driven and everything was like hands off, let's just let these auteurs do what they do because it's cool. You had a lot of people who were just letting the camera roll and, the editing was very different. The length of scenes was different. I don't know if structurally they meant it to be different because you're still telling a story with a beginning, middle, and an end, but the proportions may have been very different. Maybe
that's what I'm talking about.
If we wrote the movie today, maybe the movie would have been really about Travis Bickle at the end of the first act, meeting up with Iris, the 12-year-old hooker, and them going on this journey together to solve the ills of the city, and all of that. So that's kind of where, that's the more modern retelling of it, and then changing each other along the way.
They would also show
the movie was written recently by people who I don't think understood The King of Comedy or Taxi Driver, and they made Joker.
Yeah.
And Joker, I think, wants to be cut from the same cloth, and it's not a good movie. And it looks like they watched something like Taxi Driver and other movies and said, man, look how ugly that is. Look how horrible people are.
Let's do that.
The movie.
Yeah.
Never mind the connection to, you know, Batman and all that other stuff. I mean, there's one scene in that movie that I like, which is when he kills his boss, but declines to kill his little person friend because that little person was the only person who was nice to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie is about a guy who's like, well, nobody's nice to me, so murder. I mean, that's not the only thing that Taxi Driver is about. Taxi Driver is about a guy who feels like he doesn't get attention and he responds with violence, which is, you know, he puts it in a way as if he's doing justice because he's going to rescue this girl, but it's still, I mean, he's doing it for the catharsis.
He was going to kill the candidate.
Right. Yeah. No, he was going to do a political assassination. Then he's going to save a girl, but he doesn't have any problem with killing. He kills Harvey Keitel and I think 2 other people when he does that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think if you watched Taxi Driver, if you watch Taxi Driver and Network every 5 years, you'd relate to them in a different way every 5 years or every period 100%. Of time. You know, and that's the beauty of a movie like Taxi Driver, despite, you know, what may be problematic with it to this day, not artistically, but just, you know, somewhat.
Both those films, like if you watch it every 5 years, they bring something new that's happening in the culture, you know, and they're very prescient. John hates that word, but that's those films do. Now, the other thing about this, you talk about the 70s auteur, there's scenes where they're just sitting around, like 4 cabbies just sitting around, and there's characters that have, like a couple characters just are talking to him or just even looking at him going, why is he looking out the window? Nowadays, we'd have to explain everybody and everything that's going on.
Yeah, that's the other
here
problem.
we just let it play out. And you're looking at Travis Bickle the whole time, watching his mannerisms, because De Niro's doing such a great job, that these other people, now the one character is Peter Doyle. Wizard was great. I mean, you know, he's the one kind of father figure for this guy, and he's crazy too.
Yeah.
And I just like that things just happen for no reason. Plus, New York City, you're right. That's a character in this film, like every 70s film. The porn shops that he goes into, the driving down the street with all the stuff going on. I mean, that stuff, all these movies, 70s movies, make New York look like that. Naturally, not faked like the Joker, you're saying, but naturally. It's just
they were just shooting what was there on the street.
That's
exactly
right. That's right.
Did you guys see the series The Deuce? Yeah, the HBO series The Deuce. Well, if you haven't seen it, you really owe it to yourself, because it's basically an homage to the 70s, basically, and it's 3 seasons. The first season is 71, the second season takes place in 77, and the third season I think is 83. I love the show. The show is great.
Is that with James Franco?
There you go. Yeah. Can't watch it now.
Yeah, I know.
David Simon.
And also, Ralph, you can't watch it because it was produced by George Pelicano.
I know. We don't want to talk about that, please.
It's a guy.
The other cool thing about that, the place that we get all our movies from, or our old pal Al, the archive, they're the ones who fixed all the porn films. They restored all those porn films that they use. Those guys up in Connecticut, Bridgeport. So there's a little connection there with the Deuce, including throwing that guy
when you talk about, like, you know, showing like how the Joker did like a recreation of terrible New York. They did the same thing in the Deuce, and they redid 42nd Street, and it's accurate, but it's funny because they have these great theater marquees of some of those 42nd Street theaters, and the marquees they're so cool. It's like the way they did them, and they're not right. I mean, they're not in the right place or whatever, but that doesn't matter. But it's all done on the soundstage. But it was great to see those big marquees and how they decided which movies to pick from 1971 and put them on the marquee. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Ralph, usually you show a trailer. We're going to show the trailer for Taxi Driver.
We'll show it when I do the cut.
Well, we have to
stop directing from your seat.
Don't we have to act like we saw the clip?
No, we're fine. Don't worry about it.
Scene.
The thing I like about, it's funny, you guys were talking about how, narratively Taxi Driver probably wouldn't be made in the same way. I always get the feeling, and rewatching it, a few weeks ago, one of the biggest things that even when I saw it the first time, probably in the late 80s when I was in my later teens, I was really surprised, and it definitely wouldn't happen today, is that Travis Bickle lives. And not only does he live, he thrives to a certain extent.
It's a happy
and
ending.
I think that's one of the great, from like a storytelling angle, that's such a great twist. And I don't mean like a surprise twist, but like just a twist on the idea that here's this guy that he tries to kill himself. He just ran out of bullets, but the idea that, so many times that, he was going down this terrible, violent path, right? Even though in some ways, at least in his second attempt, there was some morality, I guess you could say, in his attempt to save this girl from a terrible life that she was living. But he doesn't there's no way now he makes it out. Like, there's no way. You can have a guy like that who does something terrible. You can have him go down shooting. You can have him, suicide by cop. You can have all these different things happening, but there's no way that he gets out of it and then kind of like thrives. He gets the wonderful letter. There's some, clippings of him, hero taxi driver takes on gangster. Because it turns out, like, I guess the guy who was there, the John who was there, was something I never got before. I don't know why. He was a mafia guy,
The owner was a mafia guy.
Exactly.
A corrupt cop.
He was there to, whatever. And with Jodie Foster. And I don't know why that never clicked, but I was like, that's crazy. And then,
the great moment. I'm sorry, the great moment when Cybil Shepard comes back,
gets back to his cab.
And she looks at him completely differently. But I read, and I mean to interrupt, I'm sorry, but I read that a lot of critics thought that the ending was a dream sequence, that he actually
was dead.
He did die, and this was him. This is
Ebert,
before,
Ebert did that.
Yeah, okay. But then I read that Paul Schrader said that it was not a dream sequence. It's what happened. But it's a little unlike 70s movies. Often, like, the guy, remember The Gambler, the freeze frame at the end of The Gambler. It's just James Caan with the bloody face in the mirror, and that freeze frames, and they weren't happy endings necessarily, and they could get away with it. So it is interesting that in that movie.
Yeah, I was shocked at that, because that whole shot where the camera goes above them, and then it goes down the corridor, the bloody corridor, then it goes outside. It seemed to me that, okay, this movie's over, he's dead, and that's how it's going to end. And then all of a sudden they flipped it, and you see the thing on his wall, hero taxi driver. I was like, what the hell? And it completely changed the ending. I was really surprised by that. So when I started digging down the rabbit hole, you're right. There's a lot of theories that he died, and this was his fantasy. The fact that he rejected Cybil Shepard in the cab, which just his fantasy, and he's going right back to where he started from. Right. But Schrader, the director, and DeNiro all said, because DeNiro wanted to make a sequel. He goes, no, this is the end. It's a loop. That he was heading right back to the beginning where he went down that path again. That's how they described it.
Well, I mean, is he going down or is he, quote unquote, cured by the violence?
No, because even he said there's one shot when he's driving in the cab where it's red and he's looking in the rearview mirror, and he looks kind of suddenly. He goes, that was his indication that it was a loop and it was going right back to the beginning. That's what the director said. So. And then he wrote, De Niro wanted to do a sequel, and he wrote a treatment, and he gave it to Schrader, and Schrader said it was the worst thing he's ever seen. He goes, we can't do this. It's the worst thing I've ever read. We cannot do this. So, because he said
maybe really Schrader could have helped it at the script level.
Well, what Schrader said, no, I don't know if it was Schrader. It was either Schrader or the director who said he was dead after 6 months. Because he was right back
saying
to
the director,
cycle.
Like we don't know who the director.
Scorsese. I know Scorsese.
He's in the movie twice,
but he said it. He said that he probably died 6 months later because that's the path that he was heading for.
I couldn't get over. I hadn't seen this in a long time, and there were parts I had completely forgotten about. First of all, Harvey Keitel as a pimp still makes me laugh. I don't know what it is about that character that just doesn't fit for me. Can't hear you, John. But the cinematography is amazing, and it starts right at the beginning when that cab comes out of the fog. It had a Jaws feel. It had that feel of the shark coming through the water, and the shots inside the cab where you're seeing the mirror shots, and like you're saying, Travis Bickle every now you just see a close up of his eyes looking in the mirror, and the characters again in the back of the cab, and the way they shot the cab from inside the cab and outside the cab in the rain, just Through
the smoke in the beginning.
That's what I mean. That first shot, the very first shot where that cab's coming through the smoke, and you're talking about the Bernard Herrmann, right? His score,
great score.
It's just everything.
And by the way, okay, so when I saw that, because I hadn't realized that I've never seen this whole movie. I've seen plenty of scenes from it, but I've never seen the whole movie. Wow. So when the credits came up and I saw Bernard Herrmann, anytime I can connect something to Citizen Kane, because the thing for me, there were certain motifs in this movie with the music that sounded very Citizen Kane. I couldn't believe it. And I'm going, I wasn't sure if that was the same Bernard Herrmann. And I'm going, well, that was, because it had that flavor to it. I couldn't believe it. And I thought that the cinematography was very documentary style. Now, maybe that was because of their budget. But like for me, like, you know, Ralph loves the 70s movies. I'm not a big fan of the 70s movies because I find them grimy, dirty, just unpleasant.
Well, yeah.
So when I'm watching this movie,
it's guilty pleasure.
First of all, it's really about his relationship with the two women. Okay, that's basically what the thrust of this movie is. He's racist, he's homophobic, which adds to his isolation. In fact,
he'll pick up anybody.
In fact, Schrader in the original script, when he goes and kills everybody, the pimp and everybody, originally they were all black because that's how racist he was. And the studio said, you can't do this. You can't have all blacks. You got to have some whites in there. So that just added, as awful as it was to hear all that stuff, it added to his isolation. But for me, I can't say I love this movie because it's just not the type of movie I love. But I will say this. Watching De Niro, who just did The Godfather Part 2, and knowing what he's going to become, watching his performance in this movie is one of these things where you can't take your eyes off him the entire movie. And the one redemptive scene that he had, because he's going down a really bad path, was when he was talking to Peter Boyle and says, look, I'm having these weird thoughts, and he's looking for someone to help him to get out of it. And Peter Boyle gives him the absolute worst advice he could give him. But the way he played it, and then where he ended up going, even the scene with the Secret Service guy, the way he played that, to me, it's just, I find him like Brando. I love watching him in the movie where I didn't necessarily love the movie. He just is incredible. And his performance in this is incredible. And he was so young, you know, and to like I said, to know what he is going to become was really fun to watch. But I was kind of bummed out that I had never seen this before. I thought for sure I did. And then when it's going along, I go, wait a minute, I don't remember any of this. So
yeah, it's
anyway,
not an easy watch. It's not a light watch. You're not.
No, it's not. It's not. And it was tough. It was tough. But like I said, I'm just riveted by watching him. Every little tick he does, every eye thing he does. It's just an amazing thing. And Gary, so we can ring the bell, but I did a lot of acting, stage acting. And, you know, I used to think, I like to think I'm a pretty good actor. And then I watch something like that and I'm going, you know what? I'm nothing. I mean, I read lines. This guy is like, he becomes these people like Brando does. Same thing with Brando. And there's not a lot of actors that do that. You know, there's a lot of good actors that don't become the character. This guy becomes Michael Pare. But every little tick, every little body movement, there's a purpose to what he does.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to watch.
I know. I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan, and like I'll say I think I know what I'm doing as a writer mostly, and then I watch something or see something that he's written. It's like, forget it. You know, or it's just I know it's amazing.
Well, to me,
and Scorsese was not nominated either as director for the movie, which is I don't know who got his spot.
Well, it's probably a tough movie for critics to watch. I mean, I think a lot of people look back on that movie. I don't know how it got reviewed back then.
I think really well.
Yeah, but I know people look back on it differently now.
Yeah,
because of what Scorsese became and De Niro became. So it is a tough movie to watch.
Well, here's the thing: to think that the movie that I think it was the movie that Scorsese did right before Taxi Driver was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. You know, which if you watch it, I don't know if you're fans, if you've seen it, I watched it again recently. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And that movie is just incredibly well made, incredibly beautiful and well shot. And, it's so artistic and all that, but, it's fun. It's upbeat, it's got a serious core, but it's very upbeat. And then to think that just he does a complete 180 and does Taxi Driver after that, and to not nominate him for even that 180 is kind of amazing. I didn't look to see who else.
I believe he didn't want to do this movie.
He wasn't the first. I don't think he was the first director. I think there might have been somebody else that they're interested in. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, what is difficult about this film, I've always loved this. This is a film I love and respect, but don't feel the need to watch much.
That's fair.
But I think what you're saying is 100% true. This is a film you watch every 5 years, and it means a little something different because of the environment you're in.
Yeah.
And I see this country as incredibly polarized, and everyone is just so angry all the time. To me, this is a dangerous film now because it's saying, look, follow your impulses and you could be a hero.
We look at it very differently now than we would have 5 years ago and 10 years ago. But look, wasn't John Hinckley who tried to kill Reagan? Is that who it was? Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah, but now this level of cleansing the world, with, your frustration in life. And also it is very little stated, but I think it's obvious he's suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome because he was a Marine and this was a Vietnam period. Well, so it's an easy assumption to say that.
Yeah, he's drinking and popping pills the whole movie too. So
yeah. So I mean, he is. I think they didn't bring it. They didn't openly discuss that, which is cool because they didn't need to.
Right.
But that he's probably he had probably had a problem with a great deal of violence abroad, and he's bringing it home with him. He came home and his world is gone.
But even if you look,
I just wish a flood would come and wash off. And it's hilarious, the politician who's trying to agree with them, but then he's saying things like, you got to clean up this town. I wish a flood would come and wash out all the filthy people. And the politician's like, yeah, I know what you mean.
And do you know that the actor who wasn't really an actor, who played the politician, Palatine, was Leonard Harris, who was a film critic for CBS TV News in New York. And when I was growing up, he was my idol TV critic, and he was just this very kind of hapless guy. He was sort of erudite, but also a little very accessible. And he used to be on the 6 o'clock local, New York news. And he used to rate movies with camera eyes, so that it would get up to 5 camera eyes and all of that. And I, as a kid, whenever I was, I wrote him a letter. And I just said, I want to become a film critic. What can you tell me? And he wrote me back this letter, and he says, I can't. Mine would not be. I wish I had this letter to show you guys. Mine would not be mine would not be the example to take to how to become a film critic. But watch all the movies you can, become well versed in it. Blah blah blah. Good luck to you. Whatever. But then to see him end up in this movie, I don't know how he ended up in the movie. And he seemed like an actor, and he did well in it. He didn't have a lot of acting to do, but he was certainly a presence. It was pretty funny. But he was a film critic for a long time in New York.
I want to ask you, Gary. You mentioned you're a critic and a writer, and you produce movies. How do you balance how does that work? You can't criticize.
It is interesting, and when I was a kid, I wanted to be a film critic. I loved film reviews. I grew up, around all these great reviewers and all that. And film criticism meant something back then, and all of that.
Doesn't anymore.
Yeah, not doesn't anymore. And so that was kind of like the route that I wanted to take. And then I realized I wrote for my college newspaper and my high school newspaper. I wrote film reviews. And then ultimately I realized that I probably couldn't make a living doing that. I was living in Boston at the time, so I ended up getting a job in movie publicity, and that sort of gave me my trajectory into publicity until I left to become a writer again. But it came back around. I had the opportunity a number of years ago to start writing film reviews. And as a screenwriter, I've always done other work because, you have your busy periods, your fallow periods, and you just want to be busy and writing and bring in some money and all of that. So I had an opportunity to do this. And I started writing. I was writing for a pretty good website called reel.com, REL.com. And they actually paid decently for reviews. I was reviewing. And then I kind of parlayed it into writing for the LA Times because they were hiring. I started in 2007. They were hired. They had a number of freelance reviewers, and I just contacted the assignment editor. And I just said, do you need anybody else? And he said, well, no, but send me some of your samples. And I sent him my stuff from the internet, from reel.com. He says, these are great. He says, I'll give you an assignment, and then I reviewed this movie, this little independent movie. And then I started reviewing regularly for them and ultimately, have reviewed pretty regularly for them ever since. And, as somebody whose work as a writer, as a screenwriter, as a playwright, as an author, I've definitely had my share of reviews of my work to deal with, and some good, some bad. But what people will say, well, do you think it's a conflict of interest? Here you are, writing movies, and then is it fair to critique other people's movies when you're writing movies or writing other things?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair question, and I've never, and of course, people, I pay for people know what I do. I mean, freelancers do lots of things, and generally you're writing something else. But I always feel like I'm so much more qualified to critique writing as a writer. And to me, this, I start with the script of any movie, and that's where I begin that's where the critique starts. And as a writer, I'm also I think I'm really fair to films. And I think I'm really open to them, to finding the good in them. I know no movie is made without, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. It's an act of God to get a movie made of any kind. Yeah. And I mean that in a completely non-religious way, but it's just a gigantic thing. So I honestly almost never, in all the years of reviewing and the thousands of movies I reviewed, have never really run into anybody saying, hey, you shouldn't be, anybody whose movie I reviewed, let's say, saying, hey, you shouldn't, you're a writer yourself, you shouldn't be critiquing other people. Invariably, people have some respect for it because they feel, at least, forget what I know about film. I mean, that should be its own whatever. That should be the deciding factor whether you are qualified to write film reviews in many ways. But partly I think there's been a certain respect for the fact that as a writer, I'm coming at it in a very kind of hopefully embracing way. Look, some movies are terrible. I mean, what are you going to do? But and they get the reviews that pretty much everybody else is giving them. But
does the Times pick the movie for you to review, or you pick the movie?
Yeah, they almost all the time. There are a lot of freelancers. There are probably, I don't know how many, maybe 6 or 8. There are a couple of staff writers. It's changed over time. They review a little bit less now. Things have changed a little bit over time. But there's an assignment editor, and they assign out based upon how many movies they're going to review that week. They'll assign it out to everybody, and they kind of know what's, I don't want to say my specialties, but what they feel I will review.
Your wheelhouse.
My wheelhouse, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes
also whether you'll like it or not.
Now, Gary, wait a minute. So a studio, you submit a script to a studio. Yeah. The studio rejects it. Mm-hmm. They pick a film from that studio.
Right. What do you do?
Come on. Just a little bit, maybe just a tad.
Well, I'll tell you something to that end, as I'm really careful about this. If they assign me a movie to review and I know anybody connected to the movie, the producer, not the studio production company, but the producer, an actor in it, somebody who wrote it, anybody, I recuse myself.
Oh, there you go. Well, there you go.
I don't want to.
That's the right way to do it.
Well, Gary, here's my problem. I didn't work for the Times, but my first experience as a freelance writer, other than some commercials, was for a singles publication writing movie reviews in Delaware. And I didn't last long, but I wrote a review of Hot Dog the movie. I said, farting fat women is the level of humor. And I'd never met the editor. But apparently she was a heavy woman. But here's what scared me about writing.
Grant Kramer.
Yeah. Here's what scared me about writing reviews.
the movie.
A producer walked up to me and said, a producer I knew walked up and said, "Hey, Sean, what did you think of Time Cop? The Van Damme movie?" And I said, "Oh, what a piece of crap."
No way. You're wrong, but okay.
Crap. And then she goes, "The producer's interested in one of your scripts." I'm like, "But there were some interesting ideas in it, that they worked hard to realize." And I'm like, I don't ever want to find myself in that position.
Yeah.
Until
when I was watching
out of the closet.
When I was watching
I used to do hundreds of IMDb reviews under 3 different names, never my own. I had like 3 personalities, but I stopped doing that. But it's sort of like, I don't, but there's been some great writers who are film critics, in particular, more recently, Paul Anastasio, who wrote won the Oscar for Quiz Show, a fabulous writer. He was a reviewer for Washington Post.
Yeah.
So
didn't Roger Ebert write Valley of the Dolls or Return to Valley of the Dolls?
He wrote the sequel.
When I went down The Offer, when I watched The Offer, I started listening to podcasts, and Robert Evans just ripped the crap out of Pauline Kael.
Oh,
Hated her as a critic. Thought she had no taste whatsoever. If she liked the person, she was going to give a great review. She didn't understand art. This thing went on. It was just crazy.
But boy, could she make a movie?
Yes.
If she liked it.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And what's interesting, if you
built
read
careers.
Yeah, she did. If you read her reviews now, I have like all the collections of her reviews. And occasionally, if I watch a movie from the 70s, I'll go back and see what she said. They're just brilliant. I mean, they're brilliant. The way she wrote, she doesn't write them like I write a review or people write reviews. They were like think pieces. They were essays. They weren't reviews. They didn't necessarily cover everything the way we cover things. That it was just a couple of pages of her, expounding on it in the most brilliant way possible. And
that was her gift.
That was her thing. You have to go back.
She went after Orson Welles. She crossed the line.
Well, there were a lot of people. She
was right.
No, she wasn't.
Robert Evans hated her. I'm telling you, you should hear this thing. It's
Robert Evans.
Lots of people hated her.
Oh man!
Have you guys heard the podcast about the Ain't It Cool News criticism? That whole Ain't It Cool News.
I remember that was like one of the first big.
The growth of that. It's an amazing, because he ended up on the show with Roger Ebert when Gene Siskel died. The guy who ran Harry Knowles.
Knowles did it with I don't remember that.
They were trying to get Harry Knowles to do it. Yeah. Now Harry Knowles had some issues. Sexual harassment issues, which is why he's.
Yeah, I knew a couple of those guys when I lived out in LA in the end of the 90s.
The fascinating podcast.
Very interesting people to be.
Ain't it cool news, guys?
Yeah, and the way they paid critics to go and do stuff, and some of the backhand stuff they were doing, they were people were giving them secrets from the set. It's fascinating to hear the growth of that, but it's another criticism thing. So, okay, great talk. This was fantastic, Gary. You brought a lot to the table. This was
Gary, thanks for coming.
I just want to mention one thing. We talked about movies going back and watching something. I just saw Top Gun Maverick based on Chris's review. And then I went home and watched Top Gun from '86. Holy shit, is that a stupid movie?
The first one.
The first one.
Pretty bad.
It's like unbelievable how dumb
for
that
a movie of its time.
No, it was dumb when it came out.
I guess we all got caught up in the thrill of what was going on in that film. But wow, when you
how'd you like Top Gun Maverick?
I thought it was okay. It was okay. The character,
what about the aerial footage?
Yeah, of course, that's groundbreaking. The stuff they did.
All that stuff was great, man. I mean,
it's a dumb action.
Chris, I know how you feel. Don't say anything. I don't want to hear it.
I just want to throw that going back. We talk about going back once in a while and how movies that one was just nuts. And the Penny character is just.
I loved. I was just hugely disappointed with.
Which one?
I'm trying to think, because somebody else had mentioned this about films you loved when you first saw them.
We talk about that all the time. Like you look back.
But I generally will still have affection for those films.
Well, we also talk about films that Sean can't remember the name of. So we're
or who was in it.
We could never.
Susan Hayward, whoever.
Gary, is there anything you want to let our 14, 15, 20 viewers
wait, Gary, before you say that, I think we should do something, Ralph, because on our last show we said anybody who comments gets a hat and nobody commented. I think we should give Gary a hat.
Yeah, totally.
We should send him a hat.
Can I get
Gary, I'll ship it out tomorrow. I'll ship it right out tomorrow.
Where do you live, Gary? Do you live on the West Coast or are you still in New York?
Los Angeles.
Okay. You'll get a hat before his brother gets a hat who lives in Boston. Okay.
Absolutely.
You never heard of FedEx.
Look, I've got to come back because I've got all these movies from the 70s I want to talk to you guys about.
Oh,
Gary, you're in.
Gary, but wait till I'm on vacation, okay? Then come back for the 70s movies.
Gary, if you really want to come back, we will work it out and we'll make it happen. If you're serious about that.
Just give us some
your insight was great.
Tell me, did you like Clute, Gary?
Love Clute.
Of course you did.
Listen,
Gary, what about The Hospital?
I can't say because I haven't seen that like in 100 years, but I remember thinking it was good back then, but I liked a lot of things back then. I don't know. But
what about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
No, I'm not a Willy Wonka person.
There we go.
I wasn't even Willy Wonka.
There's a 70s movie.
Clute is sort of that seems to be a thing.
Ralph, please. I think you got a whole different reason why you like that one.
I haven't seen Clute literally since it came out. I just remember thinking it was a great movie then, and
well, it was a pivotal point in Ralph's life.
So
it's more than just a film.
I saw it at a drive-in movie theater.
He did. He saw it at drive-in movie.
Yeah, but I do want, if I do have a minute to be, do some selfish.
Absolutely, go for it.
Absolutely, please.
My novel,
be quiet.
I wrote last year called The Last Birthday Party. It is, I'm very proud of it. It's a really fun read, and it is about. It's a romantic comedy set in LA, set in Hollywood, and it is about a film reviewer for the LA Times who turns 50 and his life completely falls apart the day after he turns 50 and has this birthday party he didn't want. And it's how he rebuilds his life again in the most unexpected ways. And one of the ways is he dusts off an old screenplay he wrote 100 years ago and tries to resurrect his life as a screenwriter, and fantasies come true. So I think it's a fun book.
It sounds awfully cinematic to me.
It's very cinematic. I'm working on it now. I actually did write this. I did adapt into a screenplay form earlier this year. I've got it with some producers.
That's the way to do it.
Trying to get it set up. I've got my wish list of actors to play my 50-year-old non-virgin, and hopefully we'll be able to move it forward. I would love to.
Where can we find that book?
It's on Amazon. It's in bookstores. It's on all the Barnes & Noble.
All right. I will put a link in with the description of the show.
Thank you.
It's called The Last Birthday Party.
It's The Last Birthday Party. I don't know why it's on sale on Amazon. The paperback is like half off for some reason. Right now they do their algorithms and try to do their stuff. So now's a good time to buy it. But
all right,
proud of it. But I think it's a real movie lover's book, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So,
maybe we'll do a show. We'll all review it.
Cool. I want to be there.
I'm buying the Kindle as we speak.
I have to be there to defend myself.
Okay.
No defense necessary. All right. Well, Gary, really appreciate it. You spent a lot of time with us. It's fantastic. Obviously, you're welcome back anytime. So if you and the way we work is if a guest comes on, we push all our other stuff aside. So if there's a 70s film you really want to do in a couple of weeks, send me an email and we'll make it happen.
We also like classic films too. Ralph doesn't, but we like classic films.
Yes, classic films. Okay.
30s, 40s.
Okay.
So
remember.
Don't exclude that.
The fact that you guys did a whole thing on My Name is Trinity, is that the name of that movie?
That was on Cue It Up.
I mean, that was like, you're really esoteric. I thought that was great.
Well, here's the thing. We did My Name is Nobody on Cue It Up with the Q brothers.
Yeah.
And got 15,000 hits.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I'm like, let's do another Terrence Hill movie on the mother.
It was the most commented film we've ever done.
Really?
I don't get it.
Really? That was the first one, right? He did My Name is Trinity and Trinity is Still My Name. You did the first one?
Yeah, we did the first one.
Yeah. I was friends with Terrence Hill's son.
Really?
For a long time. Yeah, I haven't been in touch with him in a while. He's a great guy, and he was Terrence Hill was his dad, and he's a huge star. He's a huge star. I think he's still acting. I think he's still he's much older.
He's in some series in Italy, right?
Yeah, a miniseries.
Yeah,
something.
Some priest who solves crimes.
But when I saw that, I was like, man, these guys got it going on.
That was Sean.
Sean pulled that one out, but we enjoy that's a film I never in a million years would have watched. And I fell in love with that guy. And I just love that. I love it. And
we do have eclectic taste in movies.
That's good.
That's
good. If everybody had the same taste, what fun would it be, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. We'd be watching 70 films every week.
Well, that's how it started.
All right.
All right,
Anyway,
well, we're going to
great.
spin the wheel. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Yeah, really
Well,
appreciate
there you go.
taking the time, Gary. Thank you.
Gary, can you see that?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, he's already
On
got
my
it.
Kindle here.
All right. Cool.
All right, so I'm serious, Gary. You got a suggestion? Send me an email. We'll make it happen.
Doing it
Okay.
right now? Okay,
All
cool.
right. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are you going
Bye,
to spin
Gary.
the wheel of fortune?
Yeah, we
now?
got to spin the wheel because the next one, Gary, you're welcome to watch this. It's very
I want to
exciting.
see how we pick the next
This
movie.
is the most exciting
No,
thing.
this is now we're done with the round robins. We're going to spin for whoever does
Who
the
gets
next
the
film.
pick?
Yeah. Okay.
Is everybody on the wheel? Oh, look at that good-looking crew.
I'm not on the wheel, so that's not cool.
Oh, Drew, you're off the wheel.
I think we have
sorry,
to.
no, I got to redo. Sorry.
That's not right.
I didn't know Drew was off the wheel.
That is not right.
I didn't know that. Hang
Oh
on a
my
second.
God! What the hell kind of operation is this?
I didn't know. Good call, Drew. Sorry about that.
Oh, good. Let's put Brad on there too.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, I
This
just
is a
got screwed.
well-oiled machine, right,
I'm
Gary?
still not on the wheel. I'm
wheel.
still not on the wheel.
He's not on
I
the
just
wheel,
put you
Ralph.
on. I just put you on. Hang on a second.
Ralph, listen. Let's just go with me, and then we'll fix it next week.
No,
Put
we
a
gotta
check
fix
mark there.
it. Okay, hang on. Drew, you want
Gary, it
this
usually
one?
goes a little smoother than this. I just want you to know.
I'm seeing
So
it. I'm seeing
uncheck
how
Brad
sausage
and
is
uncheck
made.
Wojo.
Love it.
And then you'll
I
have
did that,
everybody.
but see, it won't let me check you for some reason. All right, we'll put Wojo in there. If Wojo wins,
Oh
it's you.
my
Okay,
God.
that's how we'll
the
do
way
it.
I
Just give it to
imagine it.
John, as far as I'm
You're
concerned.
no,
it's all right, Drew.
no way. No
Drew,
way.
he would never do that.
I hope it's Wojo. That would be great. Oh,
Oh yeah. This isn't rigged at all. Nope. This isn't rigged
All
at
right.
all. Completely random.
well, Gary, it's going to be a '70s film, so you're welcome to join us
my
next
God.
week.
What's it going to be, Sean? Do you know?
I don't have to think about it.
Think about
He's
it.
got to look at his Laserdisc collection.
Yeah, look at my Laserdisc, see what I got. So
8-track is a DVD collection. Right?
I've got DVD, Blu-ray, tons of. I got about 450, 500 laser discs.
Wow.
So-
Oh my God.
And before we end, we just want to all of our viewers, again, I mean, this is talk about conversation. Please subscribe, smash the like button, and share it. And again, our subscription to go up. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Gary, email me your address. I'll ship that out immediately
Excellent.
tomorrow.
I will.
And
Thanks.
check
guys.
out his book. Check out his
will.
book too.
I definitely will. Oh, you
It's
definitely.
called
Yes.
The Last
Your
Birthday.
book.
I've read it, but please, everybody.
I'm talking to the audience, Gary.
I'll wait for the
Six
movie.
people watching right now. He's going to wait for the movie.
Wait for the movie. Yeah.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Have a safe
you, Gary.
week.
Thank
Drew,
you.
I hope you're feeling better. Everybody, thanks for coming.